Hey digital world, welcome back. It's Spliced In Later time once again. How are you all doing? I hope you're doing well. I'm doing okay. I'm doing as best as can be expected, which is pretty okay. And that's okay. Stumbling on the opening here because our plan today is to just get right into today's episode because it is one of our popular but infamously long countdowns. So we're going to try and avoid the rambling at the start for no reason at all. We're just going to get right down to it. And today's top 10 is the top 10 movies of 2016. We've been working back over the years since we started in 2019. Eventually, we'll get to 1990. Who knows how far we'll go back to do it. But for now, we're on 2016. 2016, in brief summary, was a very excellent year in terms for movies and surprises mainly. Often, at the start of a year, I write down a list of all the movies I want to see for the year, and normally they're sequels, reboots, remakes, anything that's in reference to something I've already seen before. 2016 was a nice surprise. There were a lot of movies that weren't on my radar that got either recommended to me, I saw a trailer in the movie theaters. I was friends with someone who was working at a cinema, so we were able to get into quite a few movies for relatively cheap. I won't name any person or movie theater in case there's backlash trouble, but suffice it to say that it was a very lucrative year in terms of being able to go see movies for barely any money. Before we start the list, our usual parameters I have to say at the start, this is a completely biased list, completely my own. These movies might not be Academy Award winning, they may not be loved by critics. You may hate these movies, you may think anyone who likes these movies is stupid. I don't care. This is my list. It wouldn't be my top 10 if I adhered to common knowledge, to public opinion, to factors that don't attribute to my personal likes and beliefs. So if you hear any movies on here that you disagree with, I'm sorry to hear that. But feel free to let me know, as I do in front of every list, to give me your own top 10 list, to tell me what your favorite movies of 2016 are. If you disagree, that's fine. Just represent your own beliefs. Let's not delve into the hole of negativity that so many of us are very easy to fall into. Let's be classy like James Gunn, who doesn't say movies are bad, always reflects on the positives, not the negatives. And the second parameter being that I have not seen every movie of 2016, even this year, 4 years from the actual year. I'm still catching movies that came out that year, and when I see them I go, oh man, that's great, that's got to be in my top 10. So these lists are always currently changing, but I can't put a movie on here I haven't seen. It just would not make sense. Alright, there are our parameters. We're going to dive right into Spliced In Later's top 10 movies of 2016. Coming in at number 10, this should be no surprise to my avid listeners out there. You know my favorite genres, you know where most of my favorite movies come from. I'm talking about Deadpool. Now, if you've listened to my 2018 top 10, you will have seen Deadpool 2 was on that list. Strictly speaking, between Deadpool and Deadpool 2, I'm always swapping into which one I like more than the other. Normally it depends on which one I've just seen recently. But kudos to this original Deadpool in 2016. Without it, there would be no Deadpool 2. Deadpool, to give you a brief recap, as I do with most of these movies, stars Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson, who's a mercenary, a merc with the mouth. He's always saying funny things, funny jokes, always breaking the fourth wall to joke with the audience as well as the people around him. Meets the love of his life around the same time that he gets cancer. So, he undergoes an experiment to try and find a way to get his cancer cured. Unfortunately, the people experimenting on him are just awful, awful people who just torture and humiliate and traumatize him, scar him beyond belief. Eventually, he manages to escape, and what follows is basically just a revenge quest. He's out to kill the people that inflicted him with all the pain and torture, becoming Deadpool in the process. Deadpool exists in the X-Men world, technically the X-Men film franchise, so he comes across some other X-Men, mainly, specifically only, Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead. He's constantly trying to get back to his girlfriend, to kill the bad guys, and to make references and comments to popular movies, TV shows, pop culture, Ryan Reynolds' own spotty track record when it comes to making good movies. Why Deadpool was always on my top 10 list whenever I look back at 2016 is because it combines all the things I really love in a movie. First off, superheroes, particularly Marvel. Love him. Over the top action and violence. When the action is so over the top that it's funny, I can really appreciate that. And comedy. Deadpool is just so funny. Ryan Reynolds is just the perfect person to portray Deadpool. His comments about the world around him, the casting changes in X-Men movies, whether Professor X is played by James McAvoy or Patrick Stewart, his ongoing seemingly hostile feud with Hugh Jackman, his traumatizing experience on the sets of X-Men Origins Wolverine or Green Lantern, it all comes together in this movie, which is just funny stuff. I remember seeing the test footage that got leaked by a supposed unknown person. I wonder who that could be before the movie came out. So I was already anticipating it. It was one of the anticipated movies of the year. From the moment the movie started, where you had these sort of fake opening credits where it said, this movie directed by some douchebag, starring a hack fraud. I was like, this is going to be funny. And it doesn't let off. Deadpool is also one of those unique films which seems to appease everybody, whether it's my friends or even my own mother, who is genuinely not into the gory, silly violence or really silly comedies that she can't get on board with. She enjoyed Deadpool. She loved Deadpool. And that was an exciting thing to see. If I'm ever feeling blue or bad, I always put on Deadpool, and it guarantees to alleviate my mood in so many different ways. It's the movie that never thought it could be made. Deadpool himself had already been trashed in X-Men Origins, and we finally had a legitimately good 90-minute plus movie about Deadpool, which of course launched Deadpool into a further craze for all people, leading of course to Deadpool 2 later on. Having Disney acquire Deadpool is interesting. I'm curious to see what they do with Deadpool 3 if that ever gets made, but for now, at least I have our original Deadpool movies, and Deadpool, the first one, so funny, so violent, so smart. Number 10. Coming in at number 9, it's not a good top 10 list unless you have an animated movie on here. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it can be an animated movie that's not Disney or Pixar. It can just be something completely different from a different company that just completely blows you out of the water with the themes and everything it experiences. I'm talking for number 9 as Kubo and the Two Strings. Kubo and the Two Strings turned a lot of heads for critics. I know it was talked about a lot at the Academy Awards and everything. But I talk about Kubo to a few people, and not too many people are adamantly familiar with it. But everyone who has seen Kubo and the Two Strings agree that it is a great movie. I don't want to talk too much about the plot for Kubo and the Two Strings because it's an interesting experience. There are so many twists and turns and references and clues that if you go into the movie even knowing a little bit about what's going to happen, it will ruin the experience. But very, very, very broad terms, Kubo is a young boy in a very magical, mystical world that has to go on a quest to achieve a certain goal. And as he goes along on the quest, he encounters magical creatures, talking animals, a monkey, a bug that's also Matthew McConaughey. And his ultimate goal is to essentially stop the moon, to put a stop to evil within the moon. Fun facts about Kubo as well is that he wields a magical Japanese instrument. There is an actual Japanese word for it that I cannot think of at this time because I'm not fluent in Japanese. I like to think of it as a banjo. It's probably nothing like that. And also his left eye was stolen when he was just a boy. And the reasons for how and why that eye was stolen is just another reason why you should watch Kubo and the Two Strings. What's really lovely about Kubo and the Two Strings is just how beautiful it looks. The animation is top notch, whether it's the mystical lights of all the spirits that Kubo encounters, the way the Matthew McConaughey beetle character is sort of combined together with sort of a humanish appearance, running around, slicing top of buildings and boats. It just looks splendid on the eyes. It's an absolute treat. Some great voice actors in here. As I said, Matthew McConaughey's here. We also got Charlize Theron. And ultimately, it's a very moving movie. The themes that are explored in Kubo and the Two Strings are truly powerful. It's one of those animated movies where they really go at you to try and make you cry. And not in a targeted, we're going to make you cry for the sake of it. Just the things that you come across in this movie, the reveals about Kubo and his life and the hardships he endures is truly traumatizing stuff if you were a kid. It's certainly traumatizing for me as an adult. Kubo was one of those movies I saw the trailers for but did not get a chance to see in the movie theaters, but I knew someone who had seen it and said that it was just absolutely splendid. So I went out of my way to watch it at home, and it was an incredible experience, to be sure. It's delightful, it's lovely. Even if you know what's coming, it's still great to see it all again, to go experience the emotions again. Truly a great movie. As I said, in a unique turn, it's not even released by Disney or Pixar or even DreamWorks or Universal. It's released by Focus Features, which is a company I'm not familiar too much with. I'm sure if I looked into them, I would see that there are tons of movies they probably produce that I've seen. But to get an animated movie that's not Pixar to make me an emotional mess, normally it's either a Studio Ghibli movie or it's Kubo and the Two Strings. Definitely worth watching. Wonderful for kids, even more appealing for adults who know what's actually being alluded to. I can't wait to rewatch it again. It's got to be on the top 10 list. Kubo and the Two Strings, number 9. Coming in at number 8, depending if you like this genre, you may disagree. It took me a while to decide if it was going to be on this list, and then I thought, hey, I enjoy it in certain aspects of it more than other movies that I don't want to put on the list, so it's got to be on here. I'm talking about Hacksaw Ridge. Now, to be fair, I don't mind war films. I sometimes get a little bit annoyed when they devolve into just over-the-top violence for the sake of violence, with body parts flying and blood and guts everywhere. But I can appreciate it if characters introduced in the movies, the characters we follow, have enough depth and character development that I feel for them and I worry for their safety. Now, Hacksaw Ridge, the second half of the movie is just your standard violent, bloody, war-crazed battle with guts and blood and screaming and everything like that. But why I can appreciate it is because of the main character of Hacksaw Ridge and the whole first half of the movie. Hacksaw Ridge stars Andrew Garfield as a potential new recruit within the army during World War II. Before he joins the army, when he was a kid, he used to be quite a violent person, and he nearly accidentally killed his brother during a fight. So because of that, he turns to religion, but more importantly, he takes a vow of non-violence. He vows to never raise arms against anyone ever again. He doesn't get in fights. He doesn't go out hunting. He refuses to hold a weapon. That's how much he values his belief. But at the same time, he also cares deeply for his fellow human being, probably because he nearly killed his brother, and he's constantly trying to help others and make amends for that situation. So when World War II rolls around, he still wants to join the army and help as a medic. He wants to be able to save lives in the field, which he goes off and he signs up and he does all that. But once it comes into play that he also, as a medic, needs to learn how to shoot a gun and be a normal soldier, he stands up and he says, no, I will not do that. That's not why I'm here. That's not why I signed up. I'm not going to hold a gun. To which the whole army loses their minds at, and they desperately try to drill him out of the army, to throw him in jail, to say he's disobeying direct orders. And he stands firmly against his belief that it's something that he's going to do. He's not going to fight. He's just going to save lives. It is Andrew Garfield's performance that I love in this movie. He really brings that earnest belief to his character, his will to help others no matter what, but also to stick by his vow to do not harm. And what's good is that when you have a character like that who's so good and so dependent on their values, then it helps for you to believe in them as a person and worry for their safety. And also you believe when people around him start to either come around to his way of thinking or simply just respect him by standing up to his rights. Specifically, there's a sergeant in here played by Vince Vaughn. I'm not the hugest Vince Vaughn fan. I tend to get not happy with his comedy performances, or they're not my favorite things. I'm sure Vince Vaughn is fine in real life, but just as a general, if he's portraying a character, I tend to not care. And in this thing, he's the most adamant against Andrew Garfield and his wanting to be in the army. He's the very drill sergeant who just, it's all about killing the enemy before they kill you sort of thing. And you can tell he's going to be the one that's going to be the hardest to come around to Andrew Garfield's way of thinking. And Vince Vaughn plays him in a way that I tended to gravitate towards. Mainly at first I wanted Andrew Garfield to show him off and humiliate him, and then after a while I wanted Andrew Garfield to save his life, which is impressive for a performance from an actor that I don't particularly enjoy. So of course it's kind of a spoiler to say that he's still taking part in the war in the second half of the movie, because Hacksaw Ridge itself is a battle or a place in World War II where Japanese soldiers, I believe, were holding this cliff, and all the American soldiers had to climb up there and fight them off, but normally they were driven back and nearly driven off the cliff every single time. So Andrew Garfield's involved in that fight, and he's running around trying to save everybody, and at that point you love him so much that you're desperate for him to stay alive, which makes the action great and the suspense great. It's hard to recommend because you either like war films or you don't. It's also directed by Mel Gibson, which is a huge turn-off for a lot of people, myself included at some point. But Hacksaw Ridge was a very good, entertaining, heartfelt, emotional movie for me to watch. I loved Andrew Garfield in it. I loved the movie experience. I'm going to see it at the cinema. I'm always happy to put on Hacksaw Ridge again and again. So it's absolutely deserving to be up on my list. Maybe not at the top of the list, but it definitely deserves its spot at number 8. Now we come to number 7, and boy do I love a good comedy that has me laughing non-stop. This is a movie that is so funny and so hilarious and combines a lot of the things I like from properties outside of the movie. It was guaranteed for me to enjoy, even though I didn't see it at the cinemas. Number 7 is Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping. Now, maybe you've seen this film, maybe you haven't, but I'm sure a lot of people out there have seen Brooklyn Nine-Nine and appreciate that show is one of the funniest things out there, particularly Andy Samberg as Jake Peralta, the main character on the show. Andy Samberg brings this lovable goofiness to his character, this quick-wittedness to observe things around him and to react to things and scream and yell, which is just hilarious to watch. He's also part of the band Lonely Island. Now, I'm sure people are familiar with Lonely Island, especially if you were young growing up in high school over the last 10 years or so. Maybe you've heard the song Captain Jack Sparrow, which Michael Bolton hilariously contributes to. Basically, the Lonely Island made this movie, but they seized the star power that Andy Samberg has become from being on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It is a fake documentary about a pop star, played by Jake Peralta, who is very popular, but has lived in the spotlight for a very long time, that he's starting to become a has-been. And it's essentially his fall from grace as he falls apart with the rest of his band, tries to make it on his own as a rapper, goes through hilarious hijinks involving very colorful characters that he comes across, also celebrities in real life, and of course it's him learning that the true important things in his life are the friends he made along the way, his fellow bandmates, and not necessarily the fame and glamour. I love these type of documentary movies where it feels like it's watching a documentary, but it's clearly not. That's why I'm a huge fan of District 9, which I'm sure I'll discuss in a later episode. But the documentary makes a really good way of introducing you to everybody, so you know who everybody is, you know who their names are, and it's fun to have it sort of such a fictional way of watching a rise and fall of this particular pop star. You know, it's like, it's Wednesday night and Andy Samberg is low, and you go, oh dear, what happened? I want to Wikipedia this because I also want to know what happened to him in real life. Oh wait, it's not real life, it's a fake documentary. It really builds on Andy Samberg's persona, on his ability to use his whole body and his humor and his language just to be absolutely bonkers and goofy. And because The Lonely Island is a band, there's a lot of songs in here as well, actual proper songs. You can listen to the songs afterwards if you are so inclined. They go through some crazy stuff in this movie, whether it's fans exposing themselves to him having a meltdown on stage, other rival pop stars, which are clearly other very famous actors or musicians. But it's Andy Samberg, his lovableness that I've come to appreciate from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, that probably elevates this movie up into my top 10. But as I know, most people really do enjoy Brooklyn Nine-Nine, specifically Andy Samberg. This is his powerhouse performance, and it's something that you definitely have to watch. I saw something recently that Pop Star Never Stop, Never Stopping is on a list for the 100 best movies of the decade. Absolutely agree, 100%. It is great, simple fun. You don't have to invest too much into it. You just need to say, I want to laugh. And that's what we need in today's society at the moment. We need moments where we can just unplug and laugh, because it's very terrible at the moment. So sometimes we need Andy Samberg screaming and yelling and us laughing to just get through the day. There's not too much I can really say about it because it's barely a movie. It's just a documentary with a lot of funny things happening. But it's heartfelt, it's funny, it's lovely, there's good music, good actors. Andy Samberg kills it. Definitely worth watching, especially if you consider yourself a Brooklyn Nine-Nine fan. Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping, number 7. Number 6, we get into the franchises. This one didn't do very well at the box office, but is probably more accurate for the fans that wanted to see this movie, Star Trek Beyond. Now, I got into Star Trek because of the rebooted movies with J.J. Abrams and Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto. This is the third movie in that franchise. The first 2 movies made a ton of money at the box office, so a lot of people obviously went and saw these movies. However, the original information I got when I talked about with other people who were fans of Star Trek, I wasn't a fan of Star Trek at the time, was that while those movies are big action blockbusters, they're not Star Trek. They're not encompassing what Star Trek was. And eventually I did go down the rabbit hole. I watched the original Star Trek that this is based on. I watched Next Generation and all the other shows. And I really fell in love with Star Trek. I really think it's one of my favorite shows. And I have to agree. That hasn't stopped me from liking the other movies. I'm not one of those people that's going to say, oh, now I like this thing, I can't like the other. Perfectly acceptable to like both things. But I can concur that the Star Trek movies originally do not reflect the adventures, the type of scenarios that the Star Trek TV show got into. Well, Star Trek Beyond, I think, is the perfect balance. It takes the characters and the action and the themes that we've got from the first 2 Star Treks, and it also puts them on an adventure, which is classic Star Trek, which is encountering a civilization, a planet, getting marooned on that planet, dealing with their customs, the beliefs, trying to stop somebody evil from taking advantage of that planet, and also to attack the Federation and the rest of all that. It's written by Simon Pegg. Simon Pegg, one of my favorite people in the world, and it really feels like watching it that it is a love letter to Star Trek, and it is a passion project. The cast are all great. I love Chris Pine as Captain Kirk, Zachary Quinto as Mr. Spock, Simon Pegg as Scotty, Anton Yelchin in one of his final appearances as Chekhov before his untimely death around the time of this movie. Very sad. Also get some good guest stars here. We've got Idris Elba as the villain Kral. Idris Elba is a really fun actor to watch. In anything he does, he gives it 110%, whether it's something like Star Trek Beyond, some sort of popcorn schlock like Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw, or it's some moving, powerful piece like Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. He'll put in whatever it is. Even Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. That movie might be hated, but Idris Elba puts in 120% as Ghost Rider's sidekick, Moreau. He's great as this villain, which I won't say too much about because you have to see this movie to appreciate the twists and turns, as with a lot of movies. And there's also Sofia Boutella as an alien that Scotty and the rest of the crew encounter. She is really lovely as like this warrior assassin who helps them uncover the mysteries of the planet that they're on. The music is great, the action is great, the big twist about what's going on. There's all the clues are seeded in there before you get to the big reveal, so that's nice. And there's also lots of references to all sorts of Star Trek that hopefully a lot of fans will appreciate, whether it's a reference to the Star Trek Enterprise TV show with another ship that they encounter, references to Next Gen with the future that they're headed to and that sort of stuff. Leonard Nimoy's presence is always felt in these movies as well, but it never loses sight of where this particular franchise came from, the original 2009 Star Trek. And that doesn't encompass it more than in our final galactic struggle, which is set to the Beastie Boys' Sabotage, which of course is what introduced us to Kirk in the original 2009 Star Trek movie. Lots of fun, lots of action, lots of sci-fi. As a person who saw the movie having finally seen all the Star Trek shows and the Star Trek movies, I personally loved it. I appreciated it. I thought it was everything that I wanted it to be. Maybe it didn't appeal to a lot of people who'd given up. I don't know. The box office doesn't really reflect a lot of love for Star Trek Beyond, to the point that whether we get a Star Trek 4 is up in the air at the moment. But I think Star Trek Beyond was a fantastic movie for 2016. I don't think enough people saw it, but I think the people that did see it can appreciate it for what it is. Star Trek Beyond, nearly my favorite Star Trek movie of all time, number 6. Coming in at number 5, I'm at that age now where I can pick my favorite directors and really appreciate the products that they've done, to a point where if I hear that a movie that they're releasing is coming out, I'm excited for it. This director wasn't my favorite when this movie came out, but the word of mouth around it drew attention to it for me. Number 5 is Arrival. Arrival is an absolutely beautiful piece of film directed by Denis Villeneuve, who has also directed one of my other top 10 films, Blade Runner 2049. It's a very simple movie. It's just the world has to deal with the fact that an alien craft has landed on Earth. Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner have to go into the alien spacecraft, and all they have to do is try and communicate with the aliens. They communicate in a language that we cannot decipher. They probably can't understand what we're saying, so it's just them trying to break that language barrier. Why are the aliens there? Is this the first in an invasion wave? Are they refugees? Is there a connection to Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner? Has this happened before? There's so many questions that are just slowly either answered or not answered, but you don't really care because you're just intrigued by the dialogue that's in these movies, the sights, the visuals, the sounds. Denis Villeneuve movies have a lot of stuff where it's just tracking shots, taking in atmosphere and locations with no dialogue, and I can really appreciate that. I don't have to have a movie where everybody's talking constantly to appreciate it. I can watch a movie where no one says a word if what I'm watching is mesmerizing enough that I am locked in. And Arrival absolutely locks you in from the moment you start. It's really hard to talk about Arrival because every single thing that happens in it is kind of an allusion to the grand scheme and twist at the end. But suffice it to say, if you enjoy sci-fi, if you enjoy romance, if you enjoy intrigue, mystery, thriller, it's all in here. Amy Adams gives a great performance in here. She's absolutely lovely. As I mentioned, Jeremy Renner too. Also Forrest Whitaker. A lot of great actors in here. But it's a movie that you can just pop in, settle down, and just watch and be awed and inspired by what you see. And it makes you think as well, not just about the barrier between humans and space, but also the barrier of language and other races and species and even the different countries on Earth. There's always that barrier between us that we have to try and step over or negotiate if we're ever to move forward together. It doesn't have to be aliens as well. Even the barriers we put up between our own family members, whether we're having arguments with our grandparents, our mothers, our brothers, our kids, whatever. It's all sort of referenced in here. It's a thinking man's movie, Arrival. Thinking person's movie, Arrival. And it is maybe Denis Villeneuve's best film. I'm a bit more biased because of other films I've seen in terms of my own personal taste. But Arrival is when I took note and said, oh, this director, he might be the real deal. Definitely worth watching, especially if you're a movie aficionado. Arrival, number 5. As we move into our top 4, you might be wondering, yes, I mentioned an animated movie earlier, but normally there's a Disney film on here somewhere. Isn't there normally a Disney film in Spliced In Later's top 10s? Yes, there is. We have reached it. Number 4 is Moana. Moana is an absolutely fantastic movie, period, not just as an animated movie or as a Disney movie. The story follows Moana, who lives on an island with her family. She yearns to leave the island and discover new worlds, but her family are like, nope, you have to stay here. This is where you belong. And eventually, through a series of events and necessities, she does end up leaving the island, where she encounters the god Maui, voiced by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and the two of them have to continue on their quest to appease the gods and save the world, essentially. The paradise that Moana knows, her people, her civilization. She has to right a wrong that's been done years before her time, but she's the only one with the courage to do what needs to be done. Moana is a fantastic protagonist, a great addition to all the heroes of the Disney world. She is lovely, she's fierce, she's heroic, sings some great songs. Our scene stealer is The Rock as Maui. It's interesting. I think maybe he might be better off doing voice acting than live action because he puts a lot of his comedy into his voice. One thing you can say about The Rock is that he seems like a very likable, lovely person, and that comes across in his portrayal of Maui in his voice, because all he has to do is just speak what he needs to say. The animation does the rest. Maui also has some great songs, some great action scenes. Perfect. What I really love about Moana is not just the visuals as well, with the Hawaii paradise sort of thing they've got going on, But the songs in here are incredible. I love the songs more than you can imagine. Moana's How Far I'll Go. I used to sing that often. My friends didn't appreciate it. Maybe I didn't sing it as well as Moana, but it doesn't matter. I sung it as much as I could. Maui's What Can I Say Except You're Welcome. Great song. And any other song that's sung by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who provides all the music and wrote the songs for this. You'd probably be familiar with him. He wrote the very successful play Hamilton that I have never seen. Hopefully one day I will. But he sings the chanting songs for the island people. Everything in here sounds great. Fantastic. And then you combine those songs with the visuals of the island gods, the night sky, the water, and it's just beautiful and lovely and an uplifting movie as well. It really makes you think that you can do anything if you just set your mind to it. Moana, I did not see until the very end of 2016. I was very luckily just caught it because word of mouth had spread that Moana was a good movie. So I went and saw it with some friends because they were going. It's like, it's either that or be home alone by myself. So I saw it. I was mesmerized for the whole thing. It was absolutely fantastic experience. Disney seems to really strive as hard as Pixar when it comes to doing their later movies. I mean, we've just come out of Frozen, Frozen 2, Wreck-It Ralph, Ralph Breaks the Internet, Tangled, Big Hero 6, Zootopia. All of them successful, fantastic, great movies with a lot of heart, which is very good. But Moana tops a lot of them, I think, in my opinion, just for the excitement, the beauty, the songs, the adventure. Great stuff. Moana, number 4. Alright, as we move into our top 3, I'm excited to announce that 2 out of the 3 are movies that were not on my radar, movies I did not plan to see, movies I just happened to see because of word of mouth, and they were fantastic. And one of the 3 is a movie that I was anxious to see from the moment it was announced, and it did not disappoint. Which one do you think will be number 1? I'm not sure. We just better count down and find out. But number 3 is The Nice Guys. One of my favorite genres in movie is the buddy cop movie. I really enjoy when 2 very unlikely people who absolutely have nothing in common are forced to work together to solve a mystery. Buddy cop doesn't have to be limited to cops. It can be any sort of scenario where 2 very unlikely people have to work together. My favorite examples of buddy cops include Axel Foley and Rosewood and Taggart in Beverly Hills Cop, Lee and Carter in Rush Hour, Robert Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, not police officers, but detectives, that same sort of thing. The Nice Guys takes 2 very different people who were former cops but are now private eye detectives set during the past of Hollywood in Los Angeles. Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling, 2 very different people. Russell Crowe is the hard-nosed investigator who'll punch anyone and anything to get to the source of the money that he needs to get to solve his crimes, essentially. Ryan Gosling is a bit of a dork, a bit of a geek. He's constantly screaming, yelling, hurting himself, always down on his luck, always making the wrong decisions. The 2 of them are forced to work together to solve a crime involving a car accident and a dead young girl that appeared in that car. And as they're going along, they discover a vast conspiracy involving a lot of Los Angeles and Hollywood and the porn industry, essentially. But what's really great about the movie that I love is that it's directed by Shane Black. I really like Shane Black buddy cop movies. He has a certain feel and the way he portrays the 2 teaming up, which is very funny, very action-packed, and then very heartfelt when it needs to be. But it was mainly how Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling worked together that I just loved. They zipped off each other so much. They had great chemistry. Ryan Gosling, every time he screamed, I burst out laughing. It was often just him punching something and breaking his hand, which I thought was great. As I've mentioned with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I love the vintage era of Hollywood just to see the things, the cars, the types of production for movies that feel. It's just something that I wish that I could experience. I don't have to go back and live in it. I'm happy where I am now. But it's one of my favorite things to see in film. So you see them riding around in their cars, going on their adventures, uncovering conspiracy after conspiracy, fighting and bickering and screaming and yelling at each other. And it's just an absolute delightful film that really should have got more recognition than it actually did, in my opinion. I doubt it made a dent on the box office. I believe critics were raving about it but it was only the critics that actually bothered to go and see it. It is a very fun, action, interesting, lovely film that I had no idea even existed before I saw it. And I knew when I watched it that it was going to be something special to me 4 years later. And look, turns out I was right. Great stuff. It really made me realize Ryan Gosling might be one of my favorite actors. I try very hard to go and see a movie that Ryan Gosling is in, regardless of what it is. A truly entertaining and perfect example of the best buddy cop movie. The Nice Guys has to be number 3. Alright, number 2. Another movie that I knew absolutely nothing about. This movie was told to me by someone who had gone to see an advanced screening of Deadpool, coincidentally, and had also seen this movie as part of the package. Number 2 is Eddie the Eagle. Now, I know some people out there will go, oh yeah, Eddie, I love Eddie. And some people will go, what are you talking about? Well, Eddie the Eagle is based on a true story where Taron Egerton plays a young man called Eddie Edwards, who just wants to compete in ski jumping. That's all he wants to do. No one believes in him. No one gives him a chance. He didn't really train for it. He's just sort of decided, that's what I'm going to do. So with his own money, he goes down and he starts practicing so he can qualify to be in the Winter Olympics. And he comes across Hugh Jackman, who is a disgraced former ski jumper. He desperately wants Hugh Jackman to teach him how to do it. Hugh Jackman wants nothing to do with him. Then eventually, slowly comes around to the idea. He starts to warm up a little bit. He helps Eddie. Eddie does indeed qualify for the Olympics, but the whole way as he's getting there for his big jump, everybody looks down on him. Everyone thinks he's silly. He doesn't have the sort of personality that is fitting with most Olympians or athletes. He's a bit of a dork, a goofball, but it's him seeing whether he'll overcome the odds and make an impact as a ski jumper at the Winter Olympics. Taron Egerton, fantastic actor. I've already mentioned how much I love him as Elton John in Rocket Man. I also fell in love with him when he first appeared in Kingsman: The Secret Service. But his wholesome, warm portrayal of Eddie Edwards is just lovely to see. And Hugh Jackman as his gruff coach, who's just a bit of a dick, a bit of an asshole in the beginning, who eventually sees Eddie as something more than an annoyance and eventually becomes his biggest ally and supporter. I love movies like that where somebody starts out as a prick but comes around to be the best ally to this person who's just trying to follow their dream, to achieve the odds that everybody is constantly telling him you cannot do. A fun fact, Eddie was at the Winter Olympics at the same time that the Jamaican bobsled team were there, which is depicted in Cool Runnings. There's even a little reference to the two being there at the same time, very briefly in the movie. Eddie is a feel-good movie. It is a movie where, again, if you're feeling down or blue, or you ever think, I don't think I can do what I dream to do, there are things that I cannot do and I have to decide that, Eddie the Eagle shows you, absolutely not. You can do whatever you want. You just have to be the one to do it. Your biggest critic is yourself. If you can overcome yourself and do what you want to do, who knows what you can achieve. Eddie shows us right from the start of the movie, he's not even a critic of himself. He believes in himself. He knows he can do it. It's something he wants to do. It doesn't matter if he succeeds and gets the gold. He just wants to ski jump, which is great, which is lovely stuff. When I heard that it was good, I knew I had to go see it at the movie theaters. And yeah, the whole time I had a big smile on my face. I lit up. I was adamantly behind Eddie and Hugh Jackman, and I wanted them to succeed, and I wanted them to become firm friends. Basically, in a movie like this, it's not a huge surprise to know that things work out for them, but it's still nice to experience it and to really appreciate what's happening in front of you. Eddie the Eagle is a special little movie that doesn't rely on big blockbusteriness, doesn't rely on being a sequel or a remake, doesn't really care if you see the movie or not. It's just a fun movie. I love Eddie the Eagle. It's number 2. It would be number 1, but biasm really pushes this last movie ahead. And I'm not ashamed. I was discussing it with some people and I said, is it bad that I'm going to put this movie at number 1, considering what other movies I put at number 1 on the other lists? And at the end of the day, much like Eddie the Eagle, it's your list, it's your dream. You can put whatever you want at the top. So I'm just gonna do it. But before we quickly mention our number 1, once again, we're just going to throw a whole bunch of honourable mentions here. Movies that I really wanted to be on this list, because 2016 had some great movies, but unfortunately just missed the cusp. Hail Caesar, a fun little movie about Hollywood and making movies back in the old days, made by the Coen brothers. Great stuff. Zootopia, Disney movies, especially in 2016. This lovely movie about an animal paradise with Judy Hopps and Nick Wilde. Tugged at the heartstrings. The Jungle Book, the 2016 live-action remake of the original Disney product, was surprisingly very good. In fact, I even liked it more than the original one. The voice acting was great. Idris Elba was in here as Shere Khan, just really knocking it out of the park. Great film. Keanu, a lovely little movie by Key and Peele, just about these two guys that just want to get their pet cat back, who's named Keanu. Very funny. Finding Dory, Pixar continuing the trend of making sequels to beloved Pixar movies. Dory is not quite good as Nemo, but the heart and love of that undersea world is there, and I can appreciate it. La La Land, I love a good musical. I just said I love Ryan Gosling, and I love Emma Stone. And the two of them on this little romance musical in Hollywood, Tinseltown, was great. Gosh, maybe any movie set in Hollywood I just love, huh? Who can say? Apparently I can. The Magnificent Seven, the remake of the original Magnificent Seven, which is a reimagining of Seven Samurai. I love the idea of strangers just coming to town and just protecting people from assholes. Denzel Washington was great. Doctor Strange, MCU doing a movie that's not a sequel to add to their ever-expanding world. Benedict Cumberbatch is great as Doctor Strange, and the magic is lovely and trippy. Moonlight, a great movie that won the Academy Award, really showcasing African-American culture for this boy at 3 different stages of his life. Really touches on some hard themes that really need to be addressed and definitely worth watching. Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Look, yeah, it's a bit of a love letter for Star Wars people. It doesn't really rely too much on bringing anything new to the table, but I really enjoyed seeing how the Rebels got the Death Star plans, and I'm really happy with the very grim ending that this movie had. And Hidden Figures, another great movie involving African-American culture, in this case, African-American women working at NASA, and just really showing off to the men about how great they are and just trying to overcome the odds of them being there. Great movie, definitely worth seeing. But what is it? What's number one? Well, I mean, come on. You probably figured it out. Maybe you haven't. Depends if you know the year or not. But you've seen what was the top movie of 2019 and 2018 and 2017. Number one for 2016 is Captain America Civil War. Now, I already addressed it in my MCU countdown, but I'm just going to briefly touch on it again. I love Civil War because I love that it's taken all the characters that we have established in the previous MCU movies, everybody in Captain America, Iron Man, the Avengers, introducing new characters like Black Panther and Spider-Man, and just splintering them wholeheartedly, really cutting a line down the middle that is felt pretty much for the rest of the franchise up until where we are now. Cap and Iron Man have such staunch opinions about the Sokovia Accords, which is basically just the superheroes having to register to work for the UN. They go where they're told to, and they don't go if they're told not to. Cap says, we need to be able to do what we want. We need to be able to go where we go. And Iron Man says, no, there needs to be limitations because look at the collateral damage that we have caused. At some point in the movie, you're constantly flip-flopping between the two. There's no good side and bad side. All the superheroes are caught between each other. They don't know what to do. Relationships are tested. Lines are crossed, and it all culminates in this great, fantastic battle at an airport where all the superheroes just letting loose on each other and using their abilities to the best that they can. Ant-Man's grown to the size of a giant. Winter Soldier and Falcon are bickering. Spider-Man is just completely awestruck by Captain America. Great stuff. I love Civil War. I knew when it was announced and they announced who was going to be in it that it was going to be something special. I thought it would have to really stumble at the finish line for me not to love it. And of course, it did not. It was great. Looking at all the other movies of 2016, yeah, sure. I really love Eddie the Eagle. I really love The Nice Guys. But you also have to be honest with yourself. What's your favorite genre? What's your favorite thing? If there is a thing or genre that you appreciate, if you like it, you put it at number one. It doesn't matter what people say. Civil War is, as I've mentioned before, nearly my favorite MCU movie. It's my favorite movie of 2016. I was excited to go see it. I was excited watching it. I was excited afterwards. I'm excited. I'm talking about it now, and I'm really excited to watch it later. Captain America Civil War, number one of 2016. And there we are. Well, the episode's still dragging along. It's hard to do with a top 10. You can't really discuss these movies properly. You've got to give them their fair due. And that means sometimes the episode is a bit double length than what we've got. But hey, they're exciting. They're interesting. I hope I've mentioned movies that you like. I hope I've highlighted movies that you really love. I hope I've mentioned movies you hadn't thought of, which you're now considering watching. And if I've not mentioned movies that you think I should, as I've said, feel free to let me know in the comments on YouTube or whatever. Tell me what your favorite top 10s are. I'm always excited to see that. But as for that, we're going to wrap it up now. I hope you enjoy it. 2016 was a good year. I wonder if 2015 was as good. When eventually I get to that, we'll just have to see. I never know what my top 10s are until I sit down and I look at a list of everything that came out and I go, wow, there's some good movies that came out. So keep your eyes peeled and your ears tuned because eventually that'll be coming. But next week, I'll be back with a new episode as always. Until then, everybody stay safe out there. I love and appreciate you as always. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.